5 amazing panelists from our community. We first have India Green from Childcare Answers. And a little bit about Childcare Answers. We are a resource and referral agency. We support families in finding childcare, also support families in providing parent education as it relates to childcare or just parenting in general. India is our business engagement specialist, and so she helps businesses best support their staff and their employers as they're navigating the childcare world. Also, we have Aaron Hamer here. He is from the Indiana Police Department. He works in the public relations department there and is also a member of Aaron, I always forget the exact title of the commission. Can you share the title with us?
Indiana Commission on Race and Gender.
Great. And that's at the state, correct? The state commission. Yeah.
Indiana Supreme Court.
Yep, thank you so much. And then we have Becky Reich, and she is with Hendricks County for the Alliance of Diversity and also works at McCoy. We're so excited to have her here representing Hendricks County and everything they're doing for diversity there. We have Marlo Allen. She is our teacher representative today. She works at Day Early Learning as a threes educator, lead teacher, and we're excited to have Marlo here representing the voice of educators. Thank you, Marlo, for joining. And then we have Amy Torres. Amy is a lifelong partner of Childcare Answers. She's really been supportive of everything we do. And she currently works at Spark Learning Lab as a coach for programs. However, she has experience as an adjunct professor teaching pre-service teachers about anything early childhood and including bilingual education and diversity and cultural awareness. Great, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started. I have a series of questions we're gonna ask our panelists and we're gonna listen to their responses. And then at the end, if we have time, you can share questions in the chat. If you ever have a question you want answered, you can always just throw it in the chat and we can get to it at the end as well. My colleague, Vicki Lehman, will be there and she'll be monitoring the chat for us. And if you have any concerns, yep, she just turned on camera. If you have any concerns or questions, you can private message her as well. Great, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. My first question today for the panel is, how have your life experiences shaped the way you approach your work and the pursuit of equity?
So I can start the conversation. So I have long been committed to diversity and equity throughout my life. I made efforts to be well-rounded, improve in all facets of my personal life and professional life. Pursuing a brighter future did not come without obstacles. I was raised with awareness of family structure, my culture, and valuable, beliefs that have molded me into the woman I am today. Along with my family's ethnicity identity, I have my own self-identity. My core values of social justice, service, and integrity have provided the compass that has guided me throughout my life. I've committed to continuing to pursue efforts to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion in my community. Being an African-American woman, we have to take stands, we have to take charge, so.
I really like how you talk to your family identity as well as your self-identity. We have so many different identities that we pull into ourselves. So thanks for sharing that, India.
I can share next. I was thinking one way, but I'm going another way with my answer. I too feel like my life experiences have shaped my career and how I look at diversity and equity in so many different ways. And I'll begin with my daughter. When she was in preschool, that's why I began my love of early childhood. I began volunteering there. And a lot of my goals and a lot of what I saw in that realm was not very diverse. Not there wasn't many that looked like her. um, so that, I think, it was the beginning of my awareness of some things. Yeah, for her, I didn't have the same awareness as my daughter, but yeah, that was a big goal for me to get into the realm of early childhood, is to be with her and to work around and with her. Um, as she grew, I also grew my education and love of early childhood and realized there are so many diverse needs within the realm of early childhood. And um, we really need to work a lot harder to meet those needs. We can do better. We've done better and we can continue to build and do better. Um, One that is really important to me is looking at meeting providers, childcare providers, and educators where they're at as far as their linguistic needs, their home language. If they're bilingual, speak a little bit of English, but studies show that people learn best new concepts in their native language. Why not meet them where they're at and present it to them in their native language? I think my past and my life experiences have led me down this path to be really passionate about that.
Absolutely. Our families inspire us in our work all the time. And to see your daughter in a situation where you wanted her to be able to relate more and more, I can see how that would guide your work, and especially your desire to have children be able to reach information in their own language. Absolutely. Anyone else like to share about how their life shaped their approach?
Sure, I'll jump in. I happen to not be a Hoosier, and I think that often talks about, kind of goes to the diversity of sometimes our community. I was born and raised in Connecticut, which is typically known to be very, on its face, it's typically not diverse. And so being born and raised there, I had the experience of my education being, I went to art schools. And so from middle and high school, I was exposed to communities that did not necessarily look like me very young. And I'm grateful for that. So that then spurred me to come to Indiana for college. When I came to Indiana, I ran into lots of people who didn't look like me. But thankfully, as India said, your family's values and things that what you realize, how your parents or your guardians direct you, that influences the way you kind of look at yourself and view yourself. And so early on, I kind of gained those tools that then placed me into environments that I may have not have seen representation, but that representation was within me because of what my parents instilled in me. So early on, that's kind of what developed me into who I am. And then from there, my career has taken on many different forms and fashions. And so in law enforcement, we're currently living in a world today where it seems to be that diversity is not necessarily represented within law enforcement. So it allows me, the things that I've gone through has allowed me to be in rooms, many rooms, and be at the table to be able to shape what that looks like going in the future. So that's my version.
I can go ahead and go. So for me, it was different, and people who know me now would probably be surprised to know I grew up in a one stoplight town about an hour north of the Indy area. And at some point I decided that was not big enough, diverse enough for me. And so when I got to the level of student teaching, I chose to come to Indianapolis and picked IPS to teach at. And I had already been awoken to a lot of things, right? As a white female, I have the privilege of not having to deal with things along the way. But I was increasingly becoming aware every new environment I was in, every different job, every place that I coached at Pike High School, I coached at Indianapolis Met, and continually just became increasingly more frustrated about how humans that I loved were being treated. And I think at some point along the way, it was already there and a fire was lit, and I decided to basically take kind of my given privilege, and then work really, really, really hard to learn everything that I could to use that privilege combined with all of my earned knowledge and skills to just weave equity into every single thing that I do. Everything I do at work, everything I do in my personal life, everything I do as a parent. It's literally, I joke, and my kids would probably confirm it though, equity is how I move throughout space now. I see it everywhere. I call it out everywhere. And I think it's important. That's an important space for me to be in. As a white female, you have to learn your space within the DEI space, right? And there are things that are appropriate for me and things that aren't. And so I've learned that that's the piece that's appropriate for me, is to take those two combined things and then use that as a lever to get other people access to, so use my voice to get somebody into the room, not to speak for somebody, but to use that to open a door for someone else and to push that. And so really just kind of leaning into the accidental gifts that I'm given through being born the way that I am, and then using that to help elevate the work and elevate others, and just really lean into that as much as I can every day.
Absolutely. I so relate to that, Becky, as well. And Erin, I like the point you brought about community being a part of your identity too, because so far I've heard family, self, ethnicity, race, income, and community all being a part of who we are. Just me is made up of all those different components. So this has been really great to hear from each of you. Marla, would you like to share a little bit about your life experiences?
Yes, me growing up in a single parent household from the west side of Indianapolis, my mom always instilled in me to make sure I get an education, treat people with respect. Sometimes you will see differences in people, but always learn to respect them for where they are and where they came from. And it's important for me also in life, as I was raising my daughter, I instilled in her to respect, have a discussion with people, understand why they feel that way, look at their differences. And I give my credit to my mother, just always instilling, do your best and you can overcome your life experiences that you endure, and which I have. I can share. Actually, I've been in childcare all my life, and going from the classroom, I've experienced being a director, and then there's challenges as being a director that I needed some help, and I was able to get the guidance that I need. And that was just reaching out to different colleagues that was able to share with me, this is what you need to do. And it directed me to go in the right path. And now I'm back in the classroom teaching, which that's my passion. And it's every day I'm learning from my parents and the kids that are in my classroom as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think whoever we're working with, especially those little children in our lives, they fuel us. They light that fire in us, whether it's our own children or the ones we're working for, especially for this work. Thank you all for sharing about that. Our next question is, why is it critical for young children to be a part of this equity, diversity, and inclusion conversation? Why is it our responsibility to bring them in, and why should we include them in it?
First of all, what I think, it builds their self-esteem, their self-confidence, offer activities that's geared toward them. I'm gonna say having books, get books that's related to them. That's what I do in my classroom. I get books that are related to each child that are in my classroom, and we sit down and we talk about, let them look at the pictures and tell you about the pictures, and let them ask the questions. And we as adults need not to shy away from the questions that they asked us. We need to be honest with them and truthful if they want to know the answer to a question.
I can hop in there. Man, this is the bread and butter. I could just go on forever. But so a couple of things. I think it's important because I think that some folks think that like teaching DEI to kids or talking about diversity, talking about race is something that people can opt out of, especially if you look like me or your kids look like me. The truth is, by 6 months, and my childcare people can confirm this, but by 6 months, a child can identify different races by color and by feel of skin. By 3 to 5 years old, children are starting to make decisions about what that means. So I know that a common thing is like, oh, they're too young to have this discussion, right? My kids are too young to talk about race. That would be nice and all if you get to opt out, but you don't. So if we allow them at 3 to 5 to start just consuming information, then we're allowing society to teach them. We're allowing media, culture, and that may or may not be good depending on what your kids are taking in, right? And so I think that there's a common misconception that racism, bigotry is like directly taught. That's not always true. And not only is that not always true, but omission is a big way that we don't think about. When you don't talk about it, you talk about it. And so I think, especially for white parents or parents of white children, you have to focus on interruption. You have to interrupt that and talk about it. Your environment Marlo mentioned it, your environment has to reflect diversity. If you aren't in a community that's diverse, make your home diverse. Have conversations. Again, 6 months, they know it. So this isn't something that kids aren't noticing. And if you just allow it to go, then you have to work even harder on the back end to unlearn everything first and then relearn. And you may or may not be successful when it comes to the unlearning of things that have been, however long it's gone, it's been put into their brains all along the way. So I would say it's mandatory, critical. There's not enough words there to say that start it immediately in the womb. Let's go. Like, let's just all day, every day, as early as possible. It's a must. If we're talking about moving needles or changing the way that we talk about and deal with any of the issues that we have currently, we have to start with infants, children in the family, in the house immediately.
I want to piggyback on both the Marla and Becky. It's so critical for our next generation to be a part of those conversations because they're our next leaders, they're our next presidents, our next senators, our next doctors, and so forth. We have thought for years that children will automatically form those positive outlooks, but they don't. Those differences don't speak to them. And so research, like Becky said, has proven that wrong and shows that advocating and exposing those children to diversity requires promotion and participation in those conversations and those topics. Ignoring those conversations with our children, we contribute to the prejudice, we contribute to the stereotypes. And it saddens that people are not having these conversations with people. Silence about race, gender, sexual orientation, that doesn't prevent children from noticing those things, but it inhibits them from asking questions and having those critical conversations. So we have to have those conversations with those children. So that's my take on it.
I'll jump in here. I think you guys have all kind of hit the nail on the head. I think it's really also important, but what I don't think I heard is the aspect of modeling for your child. And I think that is the biggest tool. And Becky, you made a really good point about if you don't live in a diverse area, I often have these discussions, what the ask is typically, what do I do? And I think that was an excellent answer when you said you then make your home a diverse place. Because I truly believe that part of educating as a parent is to model for your child. And I think, and then to expose them to things that you typically would not have also like went on the edge to be able to answer those questions. But my wife and I are blessed to have quadruplets. So we have 2 boys and 2 girls who happen to be all consumed the same age. And I said consume because every year is a consumption of whatever they're doing. And, but what's really cool is to see how all of these children, and they're biracial, how we are introduced to conversations because we're walking down the street and we're this diverse family, we're walking diversity. So people will typically stop us and ask the questions. I mean, all kinds of questions. But one question that continues to come up from our children, and it comes from a different, because kids communicate differently as well. And they all ask these questions like what's going on in society. And we have one kid who loves to put Black Lives Matter on every individual piece of thing he owns. We have daughters who ask questions specifically about what things can we do as a community, or what should our neighborhood looks like. So we're constantly in this discussion of what happens. But Marlo said something about exposing them to the books. And I'm not necessarily going to give you a list of books or authors to read, but I think exposing them to characters who are discussing or looking like them is also very, very important. I mean, the more they can see and the more they can be exposed to the conversation, because again, like Becky said, this discussion is happening whether or not you're having a conversation with your child at all. It's literally ingrained in and it shows them how they can respect themselves, or what to tolerate and what not to tolerate. So really good answers. Sorry, I had to.
I really don't think I can add much to that. I think you guys nailed it. I was thinking to myself, we like to think that children are colorblind. They're not. They notice these differences. And I totally agree, India. If we don't talk to them or answer their question about these differences, we are doing an injustice to the children. We're teaching them that these differences are wrong by not answering their questions. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the common theme that I've heard is that this conversation is happening and we cannot ignore it. It's not something that we can just push away. And it's critical that these young children who are already talking about it are guided and modeled in a way that brings positivity and acceptance and tolerance and love into this world. So I'm kind of gonna jump a little bit to talk more about what you guys do specifically for this work. So what does equity work look like for you personally in your role? And then also this can be in your own community or family as well. You can kind of take it the direction you would like to take it. So now that we've kind of set the stage that it's important for young children and that you have a passion for it, what are you doing about that right now? Anyone can go first.
I'll go. We're all like so nice for waiting for I'll fill the space. So equity work for me looks like day-to-day movement through the world, I think. In my job at Marion County Commission on Youth, I'm the director of capacity building. Every training, everything we do to build capacity for those working with youth and families comes from my personal and our organizational equity lens. We just recently adopted a couple months ago our organizational equity and anti-racist commitment for the organization. That has been my baby for the last couple of years to pull together. So the work has been there, but it's going deeper and deeper because we know that has to be a functionality of how we serve the people that we're serving and how we expect them to serve others in our community. In my local community, I'm in Hendricks County. I'm the chair for our Alliance for Diversity over here. I'm on our district community equity team. And that actually all started from a group of us parents. It started from me holding a Black Lives rally on town hall and having students speak, to that rolling into a community equity team, to that rolling into having a DEI coordinator, and now school and school level at every building and district level equity teams within the district as well. So that work has spiraled all from one little thing and a bunch of youth voice, which is really hard to ignore. And that's a lot of what we do at McCoy too, is push that youth voice component because we know how powerful that is. Then it's every day as a parent. My kids are a little bit older. I've got one that's out of the house. I've got 2 that are teenagers. So the stuff that's out now for parents is so amazing. I'm so jealous. It was literally like digging up white privilege videos on YouTube when my kids were in elementary school, right? And they were terrible and confusing and not meant for kids, but we just dissected them and made it work. It was diagramming stuff on a whiteboard in the kitchen. And so as a parent, and then just generally, I guess, day to day, I feel like I have an expectation of myself to be mindful of it and to be a champion for it in any space that I'm in, that I hold power. So if my voice is at the table, then I look at how do I bring equity into that conversation? How do I call it out, et cetera?
I can go next. Being a voice for the voiceless and a true advocate is equity work for me. In my former role, I worked with the Department of Child Services for a little over 5 years in 2 different states. And the target area is the low income area. It is the low income families, the poverty driven families. And so getting those resources, shooting those resources to them, making sure that they have the needs that they can have, because a lot of people don't know that these resources are out there. A lot of people don't understand that they're privy to the things and the knowledge of people that have backgrounds, have degrees, have those things. You're privy to all those things that are at reach to you. So just making sure I'm always an advocate, always mentoring to the youth, always trying to encourage people and to make sure, hey, just because you are brown, black, white, purple, pink, whatever color you are, you can do the same thing those people are doing that don't look like you. So I just want to make sure that I'm always advocating in every role that I hold, or in my future too. In my current capacity, I work with Child Care Answers, amazing organization, and we're outreach to business. My role in the agency is outreach to businesses. And so I try to make sure that they're incorporating equity into their businesses. They're incorporating family-friendly policies into their business. So that's my work. I'm a true advocate. I'm never going to stop advocating for people. So
I'll go next. Sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Amy. I'll let you
Okay,
go.
thank you. I too, India, I consider myself an advocate, and I think it's something I have kind of grown into more and more. I'm that squeaky wheel in every meeting across the state. The voice for those who aren't at the table. For things that need to happen, such as more things need to happen in Spanish. We need more materials in Spanish. That's the things that I really look for. We have many childcare providers across the state of Indiana who their primary language is Spanish, and they need a voice. So I try to be that voice for them. It is not really part of my role. That's just me. Um, yeah, that's the biggest thing, is I really just try to be a voice for those who don't have a seat at the table in any way that I can. Whether that is for someone who's Spanish speaking, whether that's another language, or any other type of adaptations, or we're thinking about readability levels for trainings or resource materials, just trying to think about things so it is more ready available for everyone and not just some people.
So for me, I am I sit on all kinds of panel discussions to talk about this topic. I also, because I realize the importance of it, and I wish that there were things that were happening like this, that the audience was geared toward kids. And I have not yet been a part of that. But because I'm a police officer and I'm often in uniform, I think trying to bridge the gap between law enforcement and community, for me personally, is really, really big. And so, because I really believe Robert Pill, who said that police are the community and the community are the police. So I think it's important we've gone through not only COVID, but the tumultuous events that have gone across our country. And a lot of it has had to do with the history of law enforcement in our country. And so for me personally, when I hit that, being an African-American male, and it appears that every time there's an incident that happens in our country, it reflects an officer with African American male. So I think there's an obligation for me to be able to enter into this space from my vantage point, as well as I am raising 4 kids who look biracial. And so I think for me to educate them from the vantage point of what people will see when they look at them is very, very important for me. So I do that. I believe in parenting. I believe that my first responsibility in the community is to be a present parent. So I'm ensuring that my children can see that. I also serve on the Indiana Supreme Court Commission on Race and Gender, which our focus is to study the status of race and gender fairness in Indiana's justice system and investigate ways to improve race and gender fairness in the courts, legal systems, and state and local government, as well as among legal service providers and public organizations. So I am in this and I will be in this for quite some time. I believe it's very, very invaluable. So that's my contribution.
My work for me looks like for the last 4 years, I've been working with the Near Northwest Quality of Life on the Education Committee as the co-chair. And my focus is dealing with early childhood education in the 46208 area, making sure that the homes, home centers that are there, the daycares that are there, the different ministries that are there are still getting the same services as everybody else, making sure they know partnership. And also I wear another hat. I'm also representing their early learning. So with the opportunities that we have, I can share with what's going on and they'll be able to get the information. So yes, I'm out there fighting, especially for early childhood education, which is so important today, because we are the ones where it starts at, and then as they go on, they'll understand what needs to be done.
Thank you all for sharing. It sounds like your passion and that fire inside of you has really fueled everything you've done. And what I like is that everyone has a different part that they're impacting in our community and a different reason why, but it's all fueled by the same desire and passion. I've heard you all mention your children, your communities, and also your work, and that's beautiful and wonderful. I do want to share also, I think there's a community that we haven't talked about quite yet, and that is children and people with disabilities. And I do feel, I'm just going to share a little bit about myself right now, just to touch base on that community and how much equity work isn't just about the color of your skin, your gender, it also is about ability. So for me, I've been super passionate about working with children with disabilities and people with disabilities my whole entire career. It is something that I have done. I've been an inclusion specialist. I've worked with children with autism. I worked at the university level as an adjunct professor. And for me, what that looks like is engaging in these conversations and making sure that that community is a part of these conversations and they're always included in any conversation I have with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I did want to throw that in there to make sure that we have multiple populations being discussed today as well. So I have a question that I did not send you all, but it is kind of tied to this. You all fueled your passion and made it into your career or into what you do daily, in and out. What if we have a participant here today who's like, I have this passion and this desire, but I don't know what to do with it? What would be like a first step that they could take to either put it into their career or put it into their family or put it into the community?
It starts at home. You start with your family, volunteering. Then you kind of get a feel for which direction you want to go, in my opinion. Then you can move your career that way once you begin volunteering and see which direction you want to go. Like you said, there's many different forms diversity takes. So there's many different forms in which one could take their career or in a volunteer type basis. So that would be my suggestion. Start at home. Look within yourself, what you're really, really passionate about, and look within your community, see where you could volunteer and see what is a good fit.
To launch off what Amy said, I'm just going to continue on. I think once you do that, then it's learn everything that you can. There is so much out there. So whatever gaps you have in knowledge, learn, because it's not a good thing to try to do this and go in and tell people what a community needs. So if you're going to be a community volunteer, a community advocate, a community disruptor, any of those things, you need to be educated about the issues academically, and then you also need to be educated from people in the community on what is happening in that community and what the needs are in that community. And tread lightly, because it's not asking for people to teach you. It's asking to listen to stories if they're willing to share, because you also don't want to expect emotional labor from individuals to do the work for you. So that's a fine balance. I'm legit offering for anyone listening right now that wants to start down that path. I would be happy to come alongside you. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to help someone navigate that and what space you fit in and how to do some of that with respect for the individuals that you're trying to help. Because the last thing we need are saviors. We need individuals who are educated and know what they're doing out there doing the work. And so I think that's one of the fundamental pieces that sometimes really big-hearted, well-meaning people get wrong. And so I think that's a crucial component of the work.
I have to agree with the both of you, what you said, because it's true. I can give an example. Like you said, coming into my neighborhood, I moved there 11 years ago, and I had to work my way in to asking the questions, having the stories told, and learning. And I got a lot of information, and I learned a lot, especially from the neighbors that had been there before me. And they shared with the do's and the don'ts. Make sure you do this. Make sure you connect with this person. And having that connection and that partnership, that's what helped me. And that's why I'm compassionate about fighting for my neighborhood. And there's some more I want to do, but it's stepping away from my neighborhood. And I would like to reach out to you, but it's hard now. It's something that I want to do for myself. That's been another passion for me. So thank you for that advice that I'm going to take for me personally.
I think what was said was very well said. I think the only aspect that I would encourage in the process, and as Becky was talking, I'm shaking my head like, yes, all of the above. Yes. I think the other posture is when you go to this target audience, per se, be willing to listen, to learn. Because I think oftentimes when we enter into this space, everyone comes to this with a fiery zeal. But the sad part is oftentimes people get lost in the wake of the journey because they're not willing to listen to the story and listen with a heart of learning, like, okay, great. And whatever you do in the process, don't come to the table having learned or having read one book to say this is the journey of a person's lifelong journey. Because I think that what that does is that's extremely, that's weighty of the person that's trying to open up their heart to tell you their journey and their story. So be careful as you enter into this space, but be willing to learn. And sometimes that also means just stopping and not having a rebuttal to a certain statement, but just to have a heart of listening.
So Erin, I definitely agree with that. Becky, I was shaking my head too when you were talking. Listening is probably one of my worst strong points. At the same time, I think we wouldn't be in our positions if we didn't listen and learn. So for me, listening to my mother. It took some time, I'm not gonna lie. But listening got me to where I am today. Learning got me where I am today. So just because there's several organizations doing the same thing doesn't mean that the next person can't do it too. Never lose sight of your vision. Remember to listen and learn. Remember to grow. You have to grow to learn and grow to do those things in your community. I think just because, again, the next person is doing something, you can learn from that person and grow and help that community that you want to serve. So.
Yeah, this is all very inspiring, honestly, and very encouraging to hear. Becky, you said this a little bit ago, but you identified equity as a space, and I really feel like that could be a good summary of what you all just said. Like, enter into that space, and what does that space look like? It needs to be safe. It needs to be one that is vulnerable, but also not expecting. And so I really appreciate all of those comments that you all gave. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then if we have time, we'll answer a couple of the participants' questions. My last question is bringing it all back to early childhood and how we can start and continue this conversation with children. And I think right now we're looking for specific examples. So what does it practically look like for these little learners, ages 3 to 8? Not ages 3 to 8, I'm sorry, ages 0, babies, all the way to age 8. And then I know that, like Marlo talked about reading books. So can we go deeper into that? Maybe if it is reading books, what questions are you asking? If it's something you're doing at home, what specifically can parents do to do it at home as well? So yeah, thank you. And I'll open up the floor.
I'll go. It starts at an early age. I know we have mentioned that before. It starts at 6 months. It starts before then, starts in the womb. It starts at home. It starts with your grandparents. It starts with those conversations being had. I currently have a 3-year-old in my home, and I have a 6-year-old that's here with us sometimes as well. And we have to have those conversations. My daughter has a disability. We have to have those conversations. There's been times where a kid said something about her disability, and we have to have that conversation that you are different, but that doesn't make less than. You are different, but that doesn't make you less than that next person, or it doesn't make you not being able to do something that you want to do. My 3-year-old, he usually comes home and says, "Mom, you're a girl, Daddy's a boy, you can't do those things." And I have to have that conversation with him. Hey, just because I'm a girl and you're a boy doesn't mean that I can't do the same things that you are doing. So we have to have those conversations. He might not fully grasp what I'm saying, but if I'm not talking to him, that's the mindset he's going to continue to grow up and think women are less than. And I'm raising a feminist. so we have to have those conversations with our children. It starts now. It starts before they were even born. It starts with you. So you have to have those conversations. If you don't acknowledge differences, you fail to prepare your child. So I have to prepare my child for the world. I have to prepare him for things that are not, going to come easy to him. So I want to make sure I'm preparing my child, make sure I'm helping them grow into the person that I hope he's going to be. So.
Yes, that's perfect. I love from the womb. Let's go with also gender reveal parties. Let's get rid of those. Let's start with degendering everything for our children. Let's start there as a baseline, right? Let's stop telling kids what they are and let them decide and maneuver into that space in all ways for themselves as they develop. I know, Jamie, you mentioned very more specifics, right? And I know Jamie's next session, right, we'll talk a lot about the books and a lot of those things. I think to look at where you are, look at what I said, diversify your home. To me, that means look at who's coming into your house. Do they all look like you? That's a problem. If you don't have a choice in that for some reason, where are you taking your kids for, your school boundary is probably already set. Where are you going to church if you're a churchgoer? Where are you taking your kids for out of school time programs, sports programs? There are plenty of things where you have the opportunity to choose where you're putting your kids into things. I know when our kids were younger, we drove from the southeast side of Indianapolis to the northwest side to diversify the activities that our kids were in. because honestly, our kids grew up having so many non-white folks around them that when our neighborhood was white, they were a little bit confused. So, so we continued to put them back in spaces where they got interactions and got to learn and grow. We made sure that they had leaders, coaches that didn't look like them. Very specifically, we still ask. My son is a high-level basketball player. I still ask, one of the questions on any AAU team is, what are the demographics of your coaching staff, of the program, of his teammates? Where are we playing? I want to know all of those things. And if you tell me what I don't want to hear, then we'll go somewhere else, because it's about basketball, but it's also about grooming him into a kid who can live, exist, and be a champion for folks too, right? And so I think you have choice, more choice than people kind of act like, oh, it just doesn't, I'm in a predominantly white area, so I can't diversify, or I'm in a predominantly this area, so I can't diversify, but you have a lot of choices with that. And I know that that's easier said than done sometimes, but I challenge you that you're not trying hard enough if you haven't diversified the circles that you or your kids are in. And I know it got said a couple of times that modeling is huge. Modeling is important. So again, creating that you're modeling, but also that they're seeing diversity in the leaders, that they're getting education and support and mentoring and connections from as well.
Wow, thank you. That was good again. That was really good. I think what I take from what you said is intentionality. Despite what it is, you've got to be intentional. Whether it's taking your kid to a bookstore and allowing them to pick a book, and allowing them to pick another one, I think of the books that we've had our kids read is Who Were They? And that's such a great book. It shows you different people, and over the years, they've made them more diverse. The characters or the actual person, their biographies, they're very, very short biographies, but they're really good, and they're good. It's also good I don't think we do a good job at listening to our kids' questions though. They will take you where they want to go in their head. And you know what? If it's role playing, we're doing it. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I could say in this segment is allowing them to ask the question. And it's truly okay if you don't know the answer, but the onus is on you as the guardian or parent to then find that out. Like, okay, great. I don't know. That's a big question. I remember my daughter specifically, it's usually, there's two of the kids that ask you questions that baffle you of our family. Not that the other ones don't ask good questions, but the ones that stumble us as parents. And I'm like, I'm probably going to wait till mom gets home, because I think she will answer it from a place of like, she does a really good job in communicating. And obviously I do as well with our kids, but she can take things that are big thoughts that I think that I'm like, I am not personally ready for this conversation, and make it simpler in a way where it's more consumable or palatable. And then there's times where I'll just answer the question and then we will talk about it, but allow your kid to take you places in their mind. Because again, like you said, they're developing these things by 6 months. These kids know where they want to, they'll ask you questions, and allow them to be kids. And if it's a little too mature for them, then dumb it down or make it a little less easier to interpret. But I mean, allow them to take you where they're going to bring you, because they will bring you some places that you're not ready to go. And it's great.
Aaron, I guess we have the same thought, because my first one is lead by example. Just like you said, don't discourage the questions. Like you said, they will ask questions and then they want to know why. And then you got to like tell them why. Why is it important? Why is this and why is that? The similarities. I don't so much focus on the differences. I like to focus on the similarities, especially with my young children. So I'm getting the younger threes, and then I have my older threes. But I go back to books. I'm real passionate with literature. So it's important, because looking at the books and then letting them like read it back to you through with them themselves, and them telling a story, you get their view of how they feel about it. So that's how I feel about especially working with young children.
I agree. Modeling in the classroom, at home, I could not agree more. I would like to throw a resource out there, and I'll put it in the chat here in just a minute. But I had came across a resource a while back, and it is the NACY's Advancing Equity in Early Childhood Education statement. It's very thorough. Really, really like it, and it gives you a lot to go on that I think transfers for families as well as the classroom. So I will throw that in there in just a minute. And there's another, as far as like literature, kind of piggybacking on what Marlo was mentioning, I too like to have the representation, whether you have all of that representation in person in there, it still should be in your classroom, whether that's just not just in the literature, but with your baby dolls and your little Lego people, your signs, pictures, family pictures, all of those things. There's just so many opportunities. And I think if you look at it that way as opportunities, and those things can translate to home too as well. There's just many opportunities that you can role model and share these things with children.
Thanks so much. Yeah, our next workshop in this series is about diversifying your materials at home. So, and that's on September 10th. So tune in then. But I love everything you all said. India, I heard you say it proudly and say it loud, that it starts with you. So I really, that stood out to me. And then another theme was just this idea of us stop telling our children or who they are or what they're going to be or anything that put something on them, if you will, and let them open up and let them talk to you, let them ask you. And I will say there is fear there for people. I know sometimes I have fear about answering it correctly, especially when I was teaching. You want to make sure you say the right thing, but sometimes you're not going to, and sometimes you just need to answer the question and have that conversation. And then acknowledge to even your 3-year-old that, hey, I'm learning too, let's learn this together. And I think that's important because I know, like Erin, you're saying it's hard to think of a way to talk to 3-year-olds about it, but sometimes it's hard for me as an educator to really grasp onto those bigger concepts that I should be talking to them about. So I think all of this is important, and to give yourself the freedom to learn with the children. Great. Well, I have so appreciated each of you being here today. I would like to, we have a couple more questions we could ask, but I do want to open it up for some questions in the chat box. You can type them in there. I know we've had some comments at the beginning. I think there is a comment about race being a social construct. And so from the age of birth to 6 months, are they really noticing skin tones and feeling there? I know that's a huge topic to dive into, and I don't think we can dive into the idea of race being a social construct in 5 minutes. But Becky, do you want to talk just a quick bit about that?
Sure. Yes, race is a social construct, period. We'll keep that short. However, the most important thing is to acknowledge maybe they don't recognize that it's race at 6 months, right? But they recognize that this skin looks different than that skin. This skin feels different than that skin. And so those differences are noticed. Is really the important piece, right? And so whether or not, yes, yeah, I agree with you. We could really go on forever for that. But yes, the point, regardless, if they can name it, right? And kids don't always have the right language, which is why it's important to start giving them that language early. They don't have the right language at that age, or any language at that age, but they can notice that one is not like the other.
Thank you. Vicki, do we have any questions that have come to you, and or would you like to share some thoughts or comments?
I do not see any questions that have come in. We did have One person earlier that said, Erin, I totally agree with you about modeling. In the culture of our family, we were taught do as I say and not as I do. My conversation is constantly reminding families that we live in a society where children do as we do and not as we say in so many instances. Some are courageous enough to call parents out on it. I say courageous because culture is very relevant in families of color. A lot of people, somebody said, thank you, Erin, for your service. A lot of other like just feedback and different things like that. Amy's put some really great resources, some great book, and then the link to the NACCE position statement, which I feel like I've seen before. And you know, if it came from NACCE, then they're doing it right. So I just think that there is, this has been such a great opportunity to hear from all of you as the panel on, you know, what your life experiences have been. And there aren't a lot of questions in here, but I'm just so grateful. And I think it's just a really awesome opportunity to hear different people's perspectives, because that's what it's about. And that's how you learn about things. You learn from, you know, research and different things like that, but you also really learn from people. And so I think that this has been such a great opportunity to set the tone. Sorry, it's late on a Friday. Set the tone for the rest of this series that is going to be happening.
Yes, I agree. Well, if there are no other questions, panelists, feel free to either share your information in the chat box if you'd like, or you can send it to me and I will send it out in a week when we send out the recording to everybody as well. We are so thankful to have you and to start this conversation. And I encourage everyone here today to really embrace this for our community in Central Indiana, Indianapolis, Hendricks County, and Hamilton County, really just to feel like you can move forward and to feel that it's important and critical to move forward for our children and to really take those next steps this weekend or next week. So thank you very much. And I'm going to officially say this is done and we really appreciate you all coming.
Jamie, just super quick, if you all are still here, I'm gonna launch a poll really quick. It's super low key. It has 2 questions just about how you prefer to hear information and different things like that. If you would please give us 2 votes, just 2 clicks before you head off, that would be really, really great. And thank you all so much for being here with us today.
Yep. Thank you, Vicki.
No problem.
Thanks all.